48 hours? No, you didn't. No, no, you didn't. Didn't you? Did what? If you've watched a lot of true crime, which I'm guessing if you're here, you probably have at least somewhat dabbled, then you know that often you will come across reruns. And when 48 Hours or 2020 or Dateline or any of these rebroadcast, they will usually, at the end, do an update of some kind. And 48 Hours generally does a good job of this. I think they're one of the better ones. Instead of just running a straight rerun, they will add end screens to say, oh, and since then, this is what's happened, blah, blah, blah. This case, as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, I remember this. I remember this case. And my husband walked in the room and I even said, hey, this is this one. Oh, this is so tragic. Just, you've got, this is just, you've got to see this. They didn't go there. They ended it 2 years early. And the final end screen was from 2022. 22.
What?
Guys, there was important information all the way through 2024 on this case. Are you kidding me? There are two important people who deserve to have the story told correctly. I'm not going to cover the whole case in depth, just the highlights. The original victim, she has gotten her justice finally at long last, but there is another victim in this case. This is the case of Angie Dodge and Chris Tapp. I have to correct the record because 48 Hours, you didn't finish your homework. You didn't. The information is out there and you didn't finish your homework. So I'm going to tell you how the story ended. I'll give you a case recap and then I will tell you the updates that are so important that 48 Hours just completely slid right past. If you're new here, I'm Annette Lyon, USA Today best-selling author of the suspense novel Just One More and a whole bunch of other stuff. Also award-winning author, former editor, a whole bunch of other things. Here we discuss true crime often, but not always, where it intersects with religion. And then we have chocolate on the side because you gotta have something sweet in the middle of all the bitter. I have opinions. I rant. That's what we do here. We respect all faith traditions and those with no faith traditions. That includes my faith as well. A quick reminder to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and helps other people find this kind of content who would be interested in it. Ready? Let's go. The 48 Hours episode is called The Twisted Case of Angie Dodge. It originally aired November 2019, which was the same year that the huge twist came about, which we'll get to. Then it re-aired on February 27th of 2025 without some very necessary updates. Angie Dodge was a young woman who had just moved out into her new apartment, and she and her mom apparently had some sort of a little tiff, but then and some people say that's why she moved out. She was like 18, so it was time anyway. I don't know all of the details there, but she came home and she and her mom made up. Things were good. She goes back to her apartment, and then I believe it was that night, someone breaks in and does horrific things to her. I won't go into detail. If you're interested, you can look it up, but suffice it to say, she was SA'd and then her life was taken horrifically. The police first start zeroing in on some of her friends, her big friend group. In that friend group, there are a couple of guys. These are teenage boys, like 17, 18. These are kids who are, if they're adults, they're barely adults. Prefrontal cortex, nowhere near done being developed. They don't understand how police work. This is Idaho, so they probably don't have a lot of experience with police or crime or anything like that. So they have this one young man. I'm actually honestly forgetting his name, and he's not as important as the others, so I'm just going to slip past him anyway. But he starts saying, under pressure with the cops, that he was kind of saying, well, maybe my friend Chris was involved. Maybe he and I both had something to do with it, and I don't know. So they bring this young man, Chris, in. Chris Tapp. The cops are convinced that he is the one who did this with his buddy. And they spend, multiple polygraphs. They lie to him and say that he failed the polygraphs. And because he was lied to and because they told him he failed, no one later in the investigation ever even looked at the polygraphs. He didn't fail them. But even fellow police officers just took their word for it and never looked at them. they can't be used in court, but maybe it would have been useful to see what the results were. I don't know. There's a thought. But no, they said, no, you're lying. And so you get this young kid, and he's like, could I have done something? You know, these coerced confessions. And they interrogated him under intense pressure for like something like 60 hours across 2 weeks. That's almost a full-time job. I mean, like, that's insane. Like, and he's a teenager. This poor kid. And they kept saying, if you just tell us this, then we'll let you go home and all that. And of course, as a young kid, he believes them and he's so confused. They arrest him and take him to trial and convict him based entirely on this coerced confession. Fast forward all these years, more evidence starts coming out, and the DNA at the scene does not match Chris. That should have been like red flags all over the place, but they're like, oh, well, we thought there were two people. So he was just the other one.
Sure, Jan.
But then Angie's mother herself starts doing more and more research on her own, and she's like, but the way the police said that he was there and what he did as an accomplice, he would have left his DNA. There's no way he couldn't have. And so she says the wrong guy is in prison for this. Chris had nothing to do with this, and the DNA didn't match the other kid either. It's some third person. They don't know who it is, but Angie's mother said, look, you have the wrong guy. I want justice for my daughter, and it's not him. And they said that she was pestering the police department, saying, help me find my daughter's killer. And bless her, because how many women and how many families have been just blinded by, oh, someone's arrested, let's put them behind bars for life, whether or not they're necessarily guilty. She did the research and found out, oh my goodness, this man is not guilty. He can't be the one. Let's find the real person. Let's get him exonerated. He was in prison for 20 years for a crime he did not commit. Finally, in 2017, keeping in mind he's been in prison since the 90s as a teenager, and now he's a grown man. He's been in prison longer than he was out as a person before all this. In 2017, his lawyers managed to convince authorities that the authorities had coerced his client. Prosecutors then agreed to vacate his R-word conviction, which is part of the case, which is also like, if he had done that thing, again, his DNA would have had to be at the scene and on Angie. There's no way he could have done that and not had some DNA somewhere, and it wasn't anywhere. So they say, we'll vacate that part of it, and then we'll reduce your sentence to time served. So he was let out of prison in 2017, but he still had the homicide conviction on his record. If you're at all familiar with how the field of genetic genealogy has progressed and has solved so many cases since the first one with the Golden State Killer, you are probably familiar with C.C. Moore. She's the most famous of the DNA genealogists, detectives who's solving these cases. So she was brought in, and she did in fact confirm that yes, this could not have been Chris or this other kid. We're looking for a third person. They had swabbed and tried to test so many other people in and around, I believe it was Idaho Falls is where this happened. They couldn't find anyone for the longest time. And eventually she narrowed it down to a certain family, but none of the sons in the family matched the DNA. And she was getting very frustrated, obviously. And then she thought, hold up, what if there is another child somewhere that's not on the records? And she found that there had been a divorce, and then did some math, realized that the wife of that marriage was pregnant at the time of the divorce. And then she remarried, and her baby took on her new second husband's name. So genetically was her first husband's child, but had a different last name. So they track him down. Sure enough, DNA matches. He was never swabbed at the time. Apparently, he lived like on the same street as Angie, practically across the street, from what I understand. He was questioned by police early on. Did you see anything? Type thing. Never arrested, never swabbed. He skipped town pretty quickly, moved away. Gee, I wonder why. But he was right there. So when they finally track him down, they're able to, of course, match the DNA and get an arrest for him. So Chris Tapp was the first person that we know to be exonerated using genetic genealogy, not DNA itself. Like, there's been other people who've been exonerated because their DNA didn't match. But he was the first one exonerated with forensic genealogy, specifically finding the other guy, the real perpetrator, through the genealogy detective work. He's been out of prison for 2 years. In 2019, he's finally exonerated, and his conviction is taken off of his record completely. Everything is great. Now, he then sues the city of Idaho Falls for wrongful conviction. Idaho Falls City agreed to pay an $11.7 million damages to him for wrongful conviction. That is where the 48 Hours episode ends. Idaho Falls agreed to pay this amount in 2022. That is not remotely the end of the story. What happened after that is that he and another wrongfully convicted man together helped sponsor a bill in Idaho that would be statewide that would compensate those who are falsely convicted. It would give those who qualify as wrongfully convicted $62,000 for every year that they were falsely in prison. It got passed. He was awarded $1.2 million from the state. So he got 11.7 from the city, 1.2 million from the state, and he had helped get that law passed. So that was a very exciting thing for him. Now, since his release in 2017 and his conviction overturned in 2019, I'm not sure where along the line, but he got married. And as you can imagine, it didn't last because this is a guy who was arrested as a teenager and he didn't have a normal finishing growing up adulthood. And so I can imagine that any kind of relationship would be hard, especially as he's adjusting to the outside world. I don't know the issues they had, but in 2023, that is when the money came through from both the city and the state for the two different compensations for his wrongful conviction. At that time, he and his wife were going through a divorce, but he had bought a sports car for his wife and with some of that money. In August of 2023, she got into a horrific car accident. This is before the divorce was final, and she died in that accident. So suddenly his wife is gone. There's no mention of any of this stuff in the episode. Then you fast forward 2 more months, keeping in mind he's 4 to 6 months after getting the awards. He's finally getting his money and his life back, been compensated. He's gotten that law passed and helping other people. He's going around speaking to other groups all over the country about his story and trying to help law enforcement to learn better practices and to see what can happen when you don't follow good practices. All of these things are happening. So his wife dies in August. In October, he goes to Las Vegas and seemingly to attend a car show. Chris attends a party on the Strip at Resort World. The party was thrown by former race car driver John Odom and his company, Odom Racing Sports. While he is there, and I haven't found details specifically of how it happened exactly, just that a fight broke out and he was beaten severely by a former wrestler, professional wrestler, and congressional candidate, Dan Rodimer. This happened on the 29th of October of 2023. He is taken to the hospital where initially his family is told, oh, it was an accident or he got hurt somehow or he's sick. They didn't realize how serious it was, but he died on the 5th of November of blunt force trauma to the head and several brain bleeds. So this wasn't like a single punch. This wasn't a single blow. He had several brain bleeds that led to his death on the 5th of November, 2023. He was 47. He had been free for 6 years. He had been exonerated for 4. He had just got his life back. The absolute tragedy of all of this it kills me. Following Chris's death, his mother filed a complaint against John Odom and his company for negligence because apparently they failed to call 911 when he had been beaten unconscious and was just left there. He was clearly seriously injured and no one called 911. As of the 25th of January, 2025, no one but Dan Rodimer, who was the one who actually did the beating, has been charged with anything. I heard about his death because Nate Eaton mentioned it, because he mentioned it as part of, the Idaho was very aware of it. I was following Nate through all of the Daybell stuff, obviously. When I think he was interviewing some of the investigators, um, and mentioned that Chris Tapp had died. And if you are from Idaho, your heart goes out to the family, because you know this case and how tragic it was that he died of homicide after being wrongfully convicted of homicide and spending something like 20 years in jail behind bars for a crime he did not commit. So incredibly tragic. So I felt that it was important to mention that part. Chris Tapp and Angie Dodge's mother, I believe her name was Carol, they are still close in contact. He loves her to pieces, obviously, or they were in close contact until his death. She supported him every step of the way. He credited her with his release and exoneration. And I have so much respect for her, and so much sadness for his mother, Vera, and for everyone else that worked to get him free. How tragic that he lost his wife and then he lost his own life in a homicide, of all things. Finish the story the 48 hours failed to finish. Their entire update was one little sentence. The city had agreed to pay $11.7 million for wrongful conviction in 2022. So nothing about the bill that he helped pass, nothing about getting money from the state for his wrongful conviction, no mention of his marriage, his impending divorce, his wife's tragic death, or his death, which I think is so dang important that we don't forget that he too was a victim twice. Justice for Chris. Seems to have been a really good guy. He tried to do good after he got out and tried not to be bitter. This is my attempt to set the record straight, to finish the story of Chris Tapp and Angie Dodge. Angie finally got her justice at long last, but poor Chris did not. He barely had a chance at freedom before his life was taken. So, with that said, I will continue to watch 48 Hours and Dateline and 2020 and all of them. Continue to give my opinions and rants as we go along. I will soon be starting a new channel as well, a second one, because I have lots of other things I'm interested in, and this will be a hodgepodge. It'll be shorter videos where I rant about trivia and strong opinions, shocker, that I have on other topics, and I will answer questions as well. And so it's going to be a kind of a fun, more lighthearted place, for the most part. We shall see. But will still be my true crime home, so I will let you know when that channel launches. In the meantime, please make sure you give the video a like, subscribe if you're new, share it with your friends, and all of that good stuff. And until next time, I'm gonna get myself some chocolate.